Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Starbound, watching the brown and gray planet slowly grow larger on the main screen. Kepler 442b looked dead from space, just like the reports had said. No green forest, no blue oceans, no signs of life anywhere on the surface. It was exactly the kind of world that made good archaeological sites. "Take us into orbit, Lieutenant," Jake said to his pilot. The young woman nodded and began working the controls. Jake had been doing exploration missions for 12 years now, and dead worlds like this one always made him curious. What had happened? Here, why did civilizations rise and fall? Dr. Lisa Baker joined him at the front of the bridge. She was the team's expert on ancient alien cultures, and she looked excited about this mission. "The orbital scans are picking up some interesting readings from the southern continent," she said, pointing to her tablet. "There are definitely artificial structures down there, big ones." Jake looked at the data on her screen. The structures were buried under layers of dirt and rock, but they were clearly made by intelligent beings. "How old do you think they are?" he asked, hard to say without getting closer, but the mineral deposits suggest at least 10,000 years, maybe more. Lisa's eyes were bright with excitement. "Captain, this could be a major discovery. We might be looking at a completely unknown civilization." The ship's communications officer, a tall man named Pete Williams, turned around in his chair. "Captain, we're getting a message from the Federation ship that's been monitoring this sector." "Commander, Phillips wants to speak with you." Jake nodded. Commander Roy Phillips was their liaison with the Galactic Federation, and he represented the non-human species that made up most of the galaxy's government. Phillips was a Zephyrian, one of the crystal-based life forms that lived for thousands of years and had memories that went back to the early days of galactic civilization. The main screen changed to show Phillips' angular, translucent face. His voice came through the speakers with a slight echo, the way all Zephyrians sounded. "Captain Morrison, I trust your initial scans of the planet have been productive?" "Yes, Commander. Dr. Baker thinks we've found ruins from an unknown civilization. We're planning to send down a landing party tomorrow morning." Phillips was quiet for a moment. "I have reviewed the historical records for this sector, Captain. There are no known civilizations that should have existed on Kepler 442b during the time period you mentioned. Please proceed with caution and report anything unusual immediately." "Of course, Commander." "We'll follow standard archaeological protocols." After Phillips signed off, Jake turned to Lisa. "Get your team ready. We'll take the shuttle down at first light." The next morning, Jake led a small team down to the planet's surface. Besides Lisa, he brought along 2 security officers and a technology specialist named Dan Roberts. The shuttle landed near the largest structure that their scans had detected. The air on Kepler 442b was thin but breathable, and the gravity was slightly lighter than Earth normal. Jake looked around at the barren landscape. Nothing grew here, and the sky was a dull orange color. In the distance, he could see the tops of buried buildings poking up through the dirt. "The main structure is about half a mile that way," Lisa said, checking her instruments. "The readings are even stronger now that we're on the surface." They walked across the rocky ground toward the ruins. As they got closer, Jake could see that the buildings were made from some kind of dark stone that seemed to absorb light. The architecture was strange, with curved walls and spiraling towers that looked like nothing he had ever seen before. "This is incredible," Lisa whispered as they approached the largest building. "The construction techniques are completely unknown. Look at how these stones fit together without any mortar or binding agent." Dan Roberts was scanning the walls with his equipment. "Captain, I'm getting some very unusual readings. There's definitely technology buried in these walls, but it's inactive. Has been for a very long time." Jake nodded and followed Lisa as she led them to what looked like an entrance. The doorway was sealed with a heavy stone door that had symbols carved into its surface. The symbols were unlike anything in the Federation's databases of known languages. "Can we open it?" Jake asked. Lisa examined the door carefully. "I think, so, the symbols seem to be some kind of locking mechanism. If I can figure out the pattern." She pressed several of the symbols in sequence. and there was a low rumbling sound from deep within the building. The door slowly swung open, revealing a dark corridor that stretched into the depths of the structure. Jake turned on his flashlight and stepped inside. The walls were covered with more of the strange symbols, and the air smelled old and stale. They walked down the corridor for several minutes, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The passage led to a large chamber with a high ceiling. In the center of the room was a raised platform, and on that platform was something that made Jake's heart stop. It was a sword. The weapon was beautiful and terrible at the same time. The blade was made from a metal that seemed to glow with its own inner light. Strange symbols ran along the edge of the blade, pulsing with a soft blue glow. The handle was wrapped in what looked like leather, but it was perfectly preserved despite the obvious age of the place. "My God," Lisa breathed. "Jake, look at the craftsmanship. This is incredible." Don Roberts was scanning the sword with his equipment, and his face was pale. "Captain, this is impossible. The metal composition is unlike anything in our databases, and the energy readings. This thing is still active after all these years." Jake stepped closer to the platform. As he did, the symbols on the sword began to glow brighter. "Is it safe to touch?" "I don't know," Don replied. "The energy levels are stable, but I have no idea what this thing is designed to do." Before Jake could respond, Lisa gasped and pointed to the wall behind the platform. More symbols were appearing on the stone surface, glowing with the same blue light as the sword. The symbols were moving, changing, forming patterns that seemed almost familiar. "Those symbols," Lisa said slowly. "They're not alien, they're human." Jake stared at her. "That's impossible. Humans have never been to this planet before. We've only been part of the Federation for 200 years, and our technology has never been advanced enough to create something like this." But even as he said it, Jake knew something was wrong. The symbols on the wall were definitely human writing, but in a style he had never seen before. And the sword. There was something about the sword that felt familiar, like an old memory trying to surface. Suddenly, the entire chamber began to vibrate. The symbols on the walls grew brighter, and a new sound filled the air. It was like a voice speaking, but the words were unclear, as if coming from very far away. "Everyone back," Jake ordered, but it was too late. The chamber filled with light, and a figure appeared in the air above the platform. It was a hologram, but unlike any hologram Jake had ever seen. The figure was human, dressed in elaborate armor that matched the design of the sword. The holographic figure spoke, and this time the words were clear. "If you are seeing this message, then the seals have been broken and the time of forgetting is over. I am Alex Stone, last Emperor of the Terran Dominion, and I have a warning for those who come after." Jake felt his knees go weak. Terran Dominion? He had never heard of any human empire with that name. According to every history book he had ever read, humans had been a peaceful, agricultural species before joining the Federation. The hologram continued. "The Void Hunters are returning. We sacrificed everything to stop them, but our victory was only temporary. The sword you see before you is Galaxy Bane, forged in the last days of the war. It carries within it the knowledge and power needed to stand against the darkness." The image flickered and began to fade. "Find the others. Remember what we were. The galaxy depends on you." The hologram disappeared, and the chamber fell silent. Jake stared at the sword, his mind reeling. Everything he thought he knew about human history was wrong. His people had once been warriors, and they had fought in a war that nearly destroyed the galaxy. "Captain," Don Roberts said quietly, "we need to get this sword back to Federation headquarters, and we need to do it fast." Jake nodded, still staring at the weapon. As he reached out to touch it, the symbols on the blade pulsed once more, and he felt a strange warmth flow through his hand. For just a moment, he could have sworn he heard voices whispering in the darkness, calling his name. The discovery of the sword would change everything. Jake just didn't know how much yet. 3 days later, the Starbound docked at Federation headquarters above the planet New Geneva. Jake Morrison carried the sword personally, locked in a special containment case that Dan Roberts had designed. The weapon had stayed quiet during the journey, but Jake could feel it somehow. Like a warm presence in the back of his mind, Dr. Helen Carter was waiting for them at the docking bay. She was the Federation's top expert on ancient technologies, a woman in her 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes. Jake had worked with her before on other archaeological finds, but nothing as important as this. "Captain Morrison," she said, shaking his hand, "I've read your preliminary reports. This discovery could change everything we know about human history." "That's what I'm afraid of," Jake replied. "Helen, when I touched that sword, something happened. I can't explain it, but I felt connected to it somehow." Dr. Carter nodded. "We'll run every test we can think of. But first, let's get it to the secure lab." They walked through the station's corridors to the research section. Federation headquarters was huge, with representatives from dozens of alien species working together. Jake passed Zephyrons with their crystal bodies, Aquarians with their blue skin and gills, and many other species he recognized from his travels. The secure lab was deep inside the station. Protected by multiple layers of security, Dr. Carter placed the containment case on a metal table and began activating the scanning equipment. "The energy readings are incredible," she said, studying the displays. "This weapon is still active after thousands of years. The power source is completely unknown." Jake watched as she carefully opened the case. The sword lay inside, its blue glow casting strange shadows on the walls. "Is it safe to handle? Only one way to find out." Dr. Carter reached for the sword with a pair of metal tongs, but as soon as the tongs touched the blade, sparks flew and the equipment shorted out. "Interesting, it seems to reject artificial contact." "Let me try," Jake said. He had touched the sword before without any problems. He reached into the case and grasped the handle with his bare hand. The moment his skin made contact with the weapon, the lab filled with light. The sword's glow grew brighter, and Jake felt a surge of energy flow through his body. Images flashed through his mind, vast space battles, human ships fighting against creatures made of shadow and darkness, worlds burning as reality itself was torn apart. "Jake," Dr. Carter's voice seemed to come from very far away. "What's happening?" Jake blinked and found himself standing in the lab, still holding the sword. But something had changed. The weapon felt different now, more alive, as if it recognized him. The symbols on the blade were glowing steadily, and he could almost understand what they meant. "I'm fine," he said, though he wasn't sure that was true, "but I think the sword is trying to tell us something." Dr. Carter was staring at her instruments in amazement. "Jake, look at these readings. The sword's energy output just increased by 300%. And it's not just the sword. I'm getting reports from monitoring stations across the galaxy. Ancient human artifacts are activating everywhere." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of artifacts?" "We don't know yet, but the pattern is clear. Whatever you just did, it woke up technology that's been sleeping for thousands of years." Admiral Knox Bennett arrived at the lab 20 minutes later. He was a tall man with silver hair and the kind of bearing that came from decades of military service. Jake had served under him briefly early in his career, and he respected the Admiral's judgment. "Captain Morrison," the Admiral said, looking at the glowing sword, "I've been getting reports from every sector of the galaxy. Human colonies are finding ancient weapons and technology that nobody knew existed. And it's all activating at the same time." "Admiral, I think we're dealing with something much bigger than we realized," Jake said. "The hologram we saw on Kepler 442b mentioned something called the Terran Dominion. Have you ever heard of it?" Admiral Bennett's face went pale. "Where did you hear that name?" "From the hologram. A man who claimed to be the last emperor of the Terran Dominion. He said his name was Alex Stone." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. "Captain, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. There are legends, stories passed down through certain military families about a time when humans were different, more powerful, but they're just stories." "What kind of stories?" Dr. Carter asked. "Stories about a human empire that spanned the galaxy, about wars fought against enemies that came from outside reality itself, about weapons that could reshape space and time. The Admiral looked at the sword, about artifacts like this one. Jake felt the sword pulse in his hand, and more images flashed through his mind. This time he saw human soldiers in advanced armor, fighting alongside alien allies against creatures that seemed to be made of pure darkness. He saw worlds protected by massive defense systems and fleets of ships unlike anything in the modern Federation. "Admiral," Jake said slowly, "I think these stories might be true." Before the Admiral could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. The lab's communication system activated, and Commander Phillips' voice filled the room. "All senior. Staff report to the command center immediately. We have a situation." They rushed to the command center, Jake still carrying the sword. The main display showed a map of the galaxy with dozens of red warning lights scattered across it. Phillips was standing at the center of the room, his crystal body reflecting the emergency lighting. "Report," Admiral Bennett ordered. "Sir, we're receiving distress signals from the Outer Rim territories. Long-range sensors are detecting massive gravitational disturbances near the galactic edge. And there's something else." Phillips turned to face them. "The disturbances are moving toward the core worlds." Dr. Carter studied the display. "What kind of gravitational disturbances?" "Unlike anything we've seen before. Space itself appears to be dotting, and through these tiers we're detecting energy signatures that don't match any known technology." Jake felt the sword grow warm in his hand. The weapon was responding to something, and he had a terrible feeling he knew what it was. "Commander, how long before these disturbances reach the inhabited systems?" "At current speed, approximately 6 months. But Captain, there's something else you need to know. Every system that's reported these disturbances has also reported the same thing. Complete communication blackout within hours of the first detection." Admiral Bennett turned to Jake. "Captain, I need you to tell me everything about what happened on that planet. Every detail." Jake described the discovery of the sword, the holographic message, and the warning about something called the Void Hunters. As he spoke, he could see the fear growing in the Admiral's eyes. "Sir," Jake said when he finished, "I think the Void Hunters are what's causing these disturbances. And I think this sword is the key to stopping them." Phillips approached them, his crystal body humming with energy. "Captain Morrison, according to our historical records, humans joined the Federation as a peaceful species with no military technology. If what you're suggesting is true, then your people have been hiding their true nature for centuries." "Not hiding," Jake said, the words coming to him from somewhere deep in his memory. "Forgetting. The hologram said they sacrificed everything to stop the Void Hunters. I think they erased their own history to protect the galaxy." Dr. Carter was scanning the sword with a portable device. "Jake, the weapon's energy output is increasing again. And I'm detecting something else. The sword seems to be trying to establish communication with other artifacts across the galaxy." "Let it," Admiral Bennett said. "If we're facing the same enemy that nearly destroyed the galaxy once before, we need every advantage we can get." Jake closed his eyes and focused on the sword. He could feel it reaching out, connecting with other weapons and technologies scattered across human space. Each connection brought new memories, new understanding of what his people had once been. They had been warriors, protectors, guardians of the galaxy against threats that came from beyond the stars. And now those threats were returning. The sword pulsed in his hand, and Jake opened his eyes. He knew what he had to do. "Admiral, I need to go to Earth," he said. "There's something there that we need to find. Something that will help us understand what we're really facing." Admiral Bennett nodded. "Whatever you need, Captain. The fate of the galaxy may depend on it." As Jake left the command center, the sword's glow grew brighter. Somewhere in the darkness between the stars, ancient enemies were stirring. But humanity's forgotten legacy was awakening as well, and the real war was about to begin. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Federation flagship Unity as it approached the edge of the galaxy. 2 weeks had passed since the sword's awakening, and the situation had grown much worse. 12 outer rim colonies had gone completely silent, their last transmissions describing impossible things. Stars going dark, space itself cracking like broken glass, and creatures that hurt to look at directly. Admiral Bennett stood beside him, studying the tactical display. "Captain, we're about to enter the affected zone. All ships report ready, but I have to ask again, are you sure about this?" Jake looked down at the sword in his hand. Galaxy Bane had changed since their first meeting. The weapon now responded to his thoughts, and the ancient memories it carried were becoming clearer each day. He remembered things that had never happened to him personally, battles fought across the galaxy, weapons that could destroy entire fleets, and the terrible price of victory against an enemy that existed outside normal reality. "I'm sure, Admiral. The sword is guiding us to something important. The Void Hunters are getting stronger, and we need to understand what we're fighting before it's too late." Dr. Carter approached them from her monitoring station. "Jake, I'm reading massive energy disturbances ahead. The fabric of space is definitely damaged here. And there's something else. I'm detecting human technology signatures coming from the center of the disturbance." The main screen showed what had once been the Kepler system. But now, instead of planets and stars, there was only darkness. Not empty space, but actual darkness that seemed to swallow light itself, and in the center of that darkness, something was moving. "All ships, this is Admiral Bennett," the Admiral said into his communicator. "We are approaching the target zone. Maintain defensive formations and be ready for anything." The Unity led a fleet of 30 ships, the largest force the Federation could gather on short notice. Most of the crews were human, but there were also Zephyrian crystal ships, aquarium biovessels, and craft from a dozen other species. Jake hoped it would be enough. As they moved deeper into the damaged space, Jake felt the sword's energy increase. The weapon was trying to tell him something, but the message was confusing. Images of ancient battles mixed with warnings about something called the Heart of Darkness. "Captain," the ship's sensor officer called out, "we're detecting a massive structure ahead. It's definitely human in origin, but the design is unlike anything in our databases." Jake looked at the screen and felt his breath catch. Floating in the center of the darkness was a space station the size of a small moon. Its surface was covered with weapon systems that dwarfed anything the modern Federation had ever built. And it was still active, its ancient systems glowing with the same blue light as the sword. "That's a Terran battle station," Jake said, the knowledge coming from the sword's memories. "It was built to guard this sector against Void Hunter incursions. But it should have been destroyed thousands of years ago." Admiral Bennett was staring at the massive structure. "Captain, that station has enough firepower to destroy our entire fleet. If it's still active, it won't attack us," Jake said, though he wasn't entirely sure how he knew that. "The station is waiting for something, for someone." Dr. Carter's instruments were going wild. "Jake, the energy readings from that station are beyond anything we've measured. And there's something else, detecting life signs aboard the station, human life signs." Before Jake could respond, the station's communication systems activated. A voice filled the bridge, speaking in an accent that sounded ancient but was clearly human. "Unknown vessels, this is Guardian Station 7. Identify yourselves and state your purpose in this restricted zone." Admiral Bennett stepped forward. "Guardian Station, this is Admiral Knox Bennett of the Federation Fleet. We are responding to distress calls from colonies in this sector." There was a long pause. Then the voice spoke again, and this time it sounded surprised. "Federation Fleet? Admiral, what year is this according to your calendar?" "Standard year 2387, Bennett replied. Another pause, longer this time. "Admiral, this is Commander Lisa Hayes of the Terran Defense Force, according to our records. It has been over 3,000 years since we last had contact with the outside galaxy. We have been maintaining our watch as ordered, but we had assumed the worst." Jake felt the sword pulse in his hand. "Commander Hayes, this is Captain Jake Morrison. I'm carrying a weapon called Galaxy Bane. Does that name mean anything to you?" The response was immediate. "Captain Morrison, you carry the Emperor's blade?" "But that's impossible. The Emperor died sealing the primary breach, unless—" The voice trailed off. Captain, you need to come aboard this station immediately. There are things you need to know. Hour later, Jake found himself in the docking bay of the ancient battle station. The place was huge, with ceilings that disappeared into darkness above. The air smelled of metal and ozone, and the walls hummed with barely contained energy. Commander Hayes was waiting for them. She was a woman in her 30s with short black hair and eyes that seemed much older than her face. She wore armor that matched the style of the sword, and Jake could see other weapons at her belt. "Captain Morrison," she said, looking at the sword in his hand, "I never thought I would see that weapon again. May I?" Jake handed her the sword, and the moment she touched it, her eyes went wide. "By the void, you're one of his descendants. The genetic pattern is unmistakable. Whose descendant?" Jake asked. "Emperor Alex Stone, the last ruler of the Terran Dominion. You carry his bloodline, Captain." "That's why the sword chose you." Admiral Bennett stepped forward. "Commander Hayes, we need to understand what happened here. Our records show no trace of any human empire called the Terran Dominion." Commander Hayes handed the sword back to Jake. "That's because we erased them, Admiral. When the Emperor performed the Great Sealing, he didn't just lock away the void hunters. He also erased all knowledge of our military capabilities from the galaxy's collective memory. It was the only way to prevent the void hunters from tracking our descendants." Dr. Carter was scanning the station with her instruments. "Commander, how many people are aboard this station?" 12,000, Doctor. The last remnants of the Terran Defense Force. We've been in stasis for most of the last 3,000 years, awakening only when the sensors detected void hunter activity." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "And you've been detecting activity recently?" "More than activity. Captain, the seals are failing. The void hunters are breaking through in greater numbers than we've seen since the final battle. And this time, they're not just attacking randomly, they're organized, purposeful. They're looking for something." "What are they looking for?" "Admiral," Bennett asked. Commander Hayes looked at the sword in Jake's hand. "They're looking for that, Admiral. Galaxy Bane isn't just a weapon, it's a key. The Emperor used it to create the seals that hold the void hunters back, and now they want it back." The lights in the docking bay suddenly flickered, and alarm sounds began echoing through the station. A voice over the communication system announced, "All personnel to battle stations. Void hunter breach detected in Sector 7. This is not a drill." Commander Hayes grabbed her helmet. "Captain Admiral, I'm afraid our conversation will have to wait. We have a battle to fight." Jake looked at the sword in his hand, feeling its energy pulse with anticipation. "Commander, what do you need us to do?" "You need to get that weapon to the station's core, Captain. There's a chamber there that was built specifically for Galaxy Bane. If we can connect the sword to the station's main systems, we might be able to reinforce the seals. And if we can't?" Dr. Carter asked. Commander Hayes was already running toward the exit. "Then the void hunters will break through in force, and this galaxy will suffer the same fate as the last one they destroyed." Jake followed her, the sword's weight feeling heavier with each step. Behind them, Admiral Bennett was already coordinating with the fleet, preparing for a battle against an enemy that existed outside the normal laws of physics. As they moved through the station's corridors, Jake could feel the void hunters pressing against the boundaries of reality. They were close now, closer than they had been in thousands of years. And they were hungry. The real war was about to begin. Jake Morrison ran through the corridors of Guardian Station 7, following Commander Hayes toward the central core. The sword Galaxy Bane felt alive in his hand, its blue glow growing brighter with each step. Behind them, the station shook as weapon systems that had slept for thousands of years came back to life. "How much further?" Jake asked as they turned another corner. The corridors were filled with men and women in ancient armor, all moving with the quick efficiency of trained soldiers. These were the descendants of the Terran Defense Force, and they had been preparing for this day for 3,000 years. "2 more levels," Commander Hayes replied without slowing down. "The core chamber is at the heart of the station. It was designed specifically to work with weapons like yours." They reached a massive elevator that took them deep into the station's center. As they descended, Jake could feel something changing. The air itself seemed thicker, charged with energy that made his skin tingle. The sword was reacting to whatever lay ahead. "Captain," Hayes said as the elevator stopped, "before we go in there, you need to understand something. Connecting Galaxy Bane to the station's systems will change you. The weapon will become part of you in ways that can't be undone. Are you prepared for that?" Jake thought about the colonies that had gone silent, the darkness spreading across the galaxy, and the innocent people who would die if the Void Hunters broke through completely. "I'm ready." The elevator doors opened to reveal a chamber unlike anything Jake had ever seen. The room was enormous, with walls that curved up into darkness. Above, in the center, stood a platform surrounded by machinery that hummed with ancient power. And floating above the platform was a hologram of a man Jake recognized from the ruins on Kepler 442b. "Welcome, descendant," the hologram of Emperor Alex Stone said. "I have been waiting for you." Jake stepped forward, the sword pulling him toward the platform. "You're really him, the last emperor. I am a recording, nothing more. But I carry his memories, his knowledge, and his final instructions." The hologram's eyes focused on the sword. "You carry Galaxy Bane, which means the seals are failing and the Void Hunters have returned." "They have," Commander Hayes said. "Our sensors detect massive breaches across the outer rim. They're stronger than before," the Emperor's image nodded grimly. "That was always the risk. Each time they return, they learn from their previous defeats. But so do we." He looked at Jake. "You must choose now, young captain. Will you take up the burden that I and my predecessors carried? Will you become what humanity needs you to become?" Jake felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Everything he had learned about his people's hidden past, all the sacrifices that had been made to protect the galaxy, led to this moment. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "To become the bridge between what humanity was and what it must be again, to awaken the potential that sleeps in human genetic code across the galaxy, to accept the responsibility of being humanity's guardian against the darkness." Before Jake could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the chamber. A new voice spoke over the communication system. "All stations, this is Admiral Bennett. Void Hunter forces have broken through our perimeter. We're seeing ships that shouldn't exist, weapons that violate the laws of physics. We need that station's defenses online now." Commander Hayes moved to a control panel. "The main weapons are charging, but it will take time. Captain Morrison, if you're going to do this, it has to be now." Jake stepped onto the platform and held Galaxy Bane above his head. The moment the sword touched the machinery, energy flowed through him like lightning. Images flooded his mind, not just memories of ancient battles, but the experiences of every human who had ever carried the burden of protecting the galaxy. He saw the first Void Hunter incursion 10,000 years ago, when humanity was still young and the galaxy was full of civilizations that no longer existed. He witnessed the rise of the Terran Dominion, not as conquerors but as protectors who took on the terrible responsibility of standing guard against threats from beyond reality. He experienced the final battle, when Emperor Alex Stone and the last of the Terran fleet held the line while the Great Seals were constructed. He felt the Emperor's pain as he erased his own legacy from history, ensuring that future generations would be safe from Void Hunter attention, and he understood, finally, what the Void Hunters really were. They weren't just destroyers or invaders. They were entropy itself given form, the universe's tendency toward chaos and death made manifest. They didn't just want to destroy the galaxy, they wanted to unmake it, to return all of creation to the void from which it came. The energy flowing through Jake intensified, and he felt his connection to every human in the galaxy, on distant worlds. Ordinary people were suddenly remembering skills they had never learned. Farmers found themselves understanding advanced engineering. Teachers discovered they could operate weapon systems. Merchants realized they could pilot warships across human space. Ancient technologies were awakening in response to Jake's transformation. Hidden weapon caches revealed themselves. Forgotten defense systems came online. and in the deep places where the oldest human settlements had been built, massive ships began rising from underground bunkers where they had waited for this day. Jake opened his eyes and found himself changed. He could feel the station's weapons, as if they were extensions of his own body. He could sense every human ship in the fleet, every person fighting against the Void Hunters. And he could see the enemy clearly for the first time. The Void Hunters weren't ships in any normal sense. They were holes in reality shaped like vessels, crewed by beings that existed in the spaces between atoms. Their weapons didn't fire energy or projectiles. They fired pure negation, erasing whatever they touched from existence. "Commander Hayes," Jake said, his voice carrying new authority, "bring all weapons online. Target the largest breach in Sector 7. Weapons online, Captain. Targeting now." Jake reached out with his enhanced senses and found Admiral Bennett's ship. "Admiral, this is Captain Morrison. I'm transmitting targeting data for your entire fleet. Coordinate your attack with the station's main guns." "Captain, what happened to you?" "Your bio readings are off the charts. I became what I needed to become." "Admiral, now follow my lead." Jake felt the station's massive weapons charging to full power. These weren't the plasma cannons and missile systems used by the modern Federation. These were reality anchors, dimensional stabilizers, and weapons that could harm beings made of living void. The first salvo lit up space like a new star. Ancient Terran weapons reached across impossible distances and struck the Void Hunter fleet. For the first time in the battle, the enemy ships actually took damage. Several of the smaller Void vessels collapsed in on themselves, their unreality unable to maintain cohesion against weapons designed specifically to fight them, but the victory was temporary. More Void Hunters poured through the dimensional breaches, and Jake could see that they were adapting to the station's weapons. The enemy fleet began to change formation, and their ships started generating fields that partially protected them from the reality anchors. "They're learning," Commander Hayes said grimly. "Just like the Emperor warned." Jake nodded, feeling the weight of his new responsibilities. "Then we'll have to learn faster. Commander, open a channel to all human ships in the galaxy. It's time to wake up our people." As Jake prepared to send out a signal that would awaken humanity's true potential across the galaxy, he knew that this battle was just the beginning. The Void Hunters had returned stronger than before, but humanity was no longer the peaceful, agricultural species that had hidden in plain sight for 3,000 years. The war for the galaxy's survival was about to begin in earnest, and this time humanity would not hide their true nature. They would stand as they once had, as guardians against the darkness, protectors of all life against the forces that sought to return the universe to nothing. Jake gripped Galaxy Bane tighter and prepared to give the order that would change everything. The galaxy was about to remember what humans could really do when everything they loved was threatened. Jake Morrison stood at the center of Guardian Station 7, his connection to Galaxy Bane allowing him to see the entire battle across the galaxy. Through the awakened human network, he could feel thousands of his people responding to the call. On Earth, massive ships were rising from hidden underground facilities. On Mars, weapon systems that had been disguised as mining equipment were revealing their true purpose. Across human space, ordinary people were remembering who they really were, but the Void Hunters were adapting faster than Jake had hoped. Their ships were learning to resist the station's weapons, and more breaches were opening every hour. The enemy fleet was no longer just attacking randomly. They were coordinating their assault, targeting the most important human colonies in Federation worlds. "Captain," Commander Hayes called from her station, "we're receiving reports from across the galaxy. The awakened humans are fighting back, but they need coordination. They need leadership." Jake closed his eyes and reached out through the network. He could feel Captain Susan Clark on the mining vessel Deep Dig, which had just transformed into a fully armed Terran battleship. She was leading a defense of the Centauri colonies, her crew working with weapons they had never seen before, but somehow knew how to use DOT. He sensed Dr. Kevin Brown on New Tokyo, where he had discovered an ancient Terran command center beneath the city. The professor was now coordinating the evacuation of civilian populations, while directing orbital defense platforms that had been hidden for thousands of years, and he felt hundreds of others, pilots who had become ace fighters overnight, engineers who could build reality stabilizers from spare parts, soldiers who moved like they had been training for war their entire lives. "Admiral Bennett," Jake said into his communicator, "form up the fleet. We're going to hit the main Void Hunter concentration near the galactic core. Captain, that's suicide. Our sensors show thousands of enemy vessels in that area. Trust me, Admiral. We have advantages they don't know about yet." Jake turned to Commander Hayes. "How many people can this station carry?" "In battle configuration, about 50,000. Why?" "Because we're going to pick up every human we can find on the way to the core. This isn't just about stopping the Void Hunters. It's about making sure humanity never forgets who they are again." The next 6 hours were the most intense of Jake's life. Guardian Station 7 moved through space like a massive collector, gathering human ships and personnel from across the battle zone. The ancient Terran vessels that had risen from their hiding places joined the formation, creating a fleet unlike anything the galaxy had seen in 3,000 years. Each human who came aboard the station added to Jake's connection through Galaxy Bane. He could feel their memories awakening, their genetic heritage asserting itself. These weren't just farmers and merchants anymore. They were the descendants of warriors who had once held the line against the darkness between the stars. Dr. Carter found Jake in the station's central chamber as they approached the galactic core. "Jake, the energy readings from Galaxy Bane are beyond anything we can measure. Are you sure you can handle this much power?" Jake looked at the sword in his hand. The weapon was glowing so brightly now that it hurt to look at directly. "I don't have a choice, Helen. If we don't stop them here, they'll spread across the entire galaxy." "But what happens to you after this is over? The transformation you've undergone?" "I'm not sure it can be reversed," Jake smiled sadly. "Maybe. That's the point. Maybe humanity needs someone to remember what we really are, even if it means I can never go back to being just Jake Morrison." The fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the galactic core, and Jake felt his heart stop. The Void Hunters weren't just attacking the galaxy, they were trying to destroy it completely. They had opened a massive breach in space itself. And through it, Jake could see the void that existed before creation. Raw nothingness was pouring into reality, unmaking everything it touched. "All ships," Jake broadcast across the fleet, "this is it? Everything our ancestors fought for, everything we've worked to protect, comes down to this moment. Remember who you are. Remember what humans can do when everything we love is threatened." The battle that followed was beyond anything in recorded history. Human ships fought alongside Federation vessels from dozens of species, all united against an enemy that threatened the very existence of reality. The Zephyrians used their crystal bodies to focus the ancient Terran weapons. The Aquarians coordinated healing efforts for damaged ships. Even species that had never worked with humans before joined the fight, but the Void Hunters were stronger than ever. Their main ships were the size of planets, and each one was a hole in space that consumed everything around it. Jake could feel his people dying, their connections to the network going dark one by one. "Captain," Admiral Bennett's voice crackled over the communication system, "we can't get close enough to the main breach. Their defenses are too strong." Jake looked at Galaxy Bane and made his decision. "Admiral, pull the fleet back." "I'm going in alone." "Jake, no," Dr. Carter said. "You can't fight them by yourself." "I'm not going to fight them," Jake replied. "I'm going to do what Emperor Stone did 3,000 years ago. I'm going to seal the breach." Jake walked to the station's launch bay, where a small Terran fighter was waiting. The ship was ancient but perfectly maintained, designed for one purpose: to carry Galaxy Bane into the heart of enemy territory. As he climbed into the cockpit, Jake felt the weight of human history settling on his shoulders. Every sacrifice, every battle, every moment of courage that had brought his people to this point was flowing through him. The fighter launched from Guardian Station 7 and accelerated toward the massive Void breach. Void Hunter ships moved to intercept him, but Jake flew like his ancestors had, using skills that came from genetic Memory and pure instinct. He reached the edge of the breach and felt reality beginning to break down around him. The void was pulling at his ship, his body, his very existence. But Galaxy Bane was glowing brighter than ever, its power pushing back against the nothingness. Jake activated the fighter's final system, a device that would merge him permanently with the sword and use their combined energy to create a new seal. He thought about his crew on the Starbound, about Dr. Carter and Admiral Bennett, about all the people across the galaxy who were counting on him. "This is Captain Jake Morrison," he broadcast one last time. "Tell them we remembered. Tell them." Humanity kept its promise. Jake triggered the device and felt himself become one with Galaxy Bane. His consciousness expanded beyond his physical form, connecting directly with the fundamental forces of reality. He reached out with power that came from 3,000 years of human sacrifice and determination. The void breach began to close. It fought him, trying to pull more nothingness into reality, but Jake held firm. He could feel Emperor Stone's presence, guiding him along with every human who had ever stood guard against the darkness. Together, they wove new seals around the breach, stronger than before, designed to last until the end of time itself. The last thing Jake saw before his transformation was complete was the Void Hunter fleet retreating into their dying dimension, their ships unable to maintain coherence without the breach to anchor them in reality. The battle was over. The galaxy was safe, but the cost had been enormous. Jake Morrison, exploration captain and archaeological specialist, no longer existed. As a separate being, he had become something new, a guardian spirit connected to Galaxy Bane, watching over the galaxy from beyond normal space and time. Years later, when humans told stories of the war, they would speak of the day their people remembered who they really were. They would talk about the farmers who became fighter pilots, the teachers who operated ancient weapons, and the ordinary men and women who stood up to protect everything they loved. And they would remember Captain Jake Morrison, who gave up his humanity to save the galaxy, becoming a legend that would inspire future generations to stand guard against the darkness. The sword Galaxy Bane was placed in a place of honor on New Geneva. But those who knew the truth understood that Jake was still there, still watching, still ready to defend the galaxy if the need ever arose again. Humanity had reclaimed its legacy as the galaxy's protectors, and this time they would never forget.